All right, so a little story here. 2012, Brian and I met Ray and Pat, and it was in your living room. And in fact, you talked about the Bible studies that were being held. You know, we had learned about the activities through our home church, and that there were plans to plant a new church in the South Riding Oldie area. And Cal Stone, who many of you know, is a dear friend of ours at Good Shepherd, and he had learned that these Bible studies were happening, and had indicated that there were discussions going on around planting the church. And the four of us, he and Julie and Brian and I, had many discussions about wanting to become more outreach focused. And so he said, you know what, we're going to go start attending these, come check it out. And so, it sounded like a worthwhile activity, and so we went. Only to find out that, gosh, Eric and Andy Clanderman and Karen and Marcus Vosk, they were involved too. And they were also worshiped with us at Good Shepherd. So our home church at the time was Good Shepherd Lutheran in Reston. And we were absolutely firmly entrenched there. We'd been there for 22 years. While there, we grew in our faith, used our time and talents in many capacities. Our children grew up there. They had their first communion. They're confirmed there. Leaders in youth group made lasting friendships that are still very strong today. But despite all of that and being very connected to that congregation, the Holy Spirit was tugging on us to do something else for the kingdom. And so, we felt like we were being pulled out of our comfort zone. So we said, let's give it a try. And so for almost 2 years, we participated in the Bible studies and the social events, some of that you saw here. And we made more and more friends, folks like Ken and Sandy Watkinson, and Dee Dee and Kevin Piotr, and Martin Groves. I don't think Martin's here today. Charles and Les Jacoby. And at the same time, though, we still remained very connected to Good Shepherd. In fact, we would come to the Saturday night, and then Sunday we would go worship at Good Shepherd, and we stayed fully involved in everything there. So our whole life during that time was revolved around church. And then in 2014, as Ray indicated, we met Dax and Terry Jordan. And Dax was the assistant pastor, or one of them at Prince of Peace, and was brought in to help us get that first service going. And so then the activities really started to kick off to get that church going. And so Brian and I were faced with a big decision. Should we immerse ourselves in helping get that church service going, or is this the right time to just say, this was great, we're going to go back to Good Shepherd? And that was it was a big turning point for us, because we were very much in the fabric of that congregation, much like some of you were. I know Ken and Sandy and Ray and Pat. But, this new community of believers had embraced us. We were overwhelmed by the group's spirit and zeal for the church's outreach mission, and we just really felt called to make a difference out here in this area, although we didn't live here yet. So we decided we were all in. And, so we went through and participated in those planning activities you saw on some of the slides there. One of the amazing things that I remember, those trailers that you saw the pictures of, there was like a 1-inch clearance between each of the sides of the trailer. And there was one time where we were rolling them up on the planks, and somebody let go of one, and all of a sudden it rolled back down and started to go all the way down the parking lot. Another fun remembrance too is we got everything all loaded, everything was locked up, and out runs somebody with a whole pile of Sunday school materials that they had forgot to put in. So there we were, taking everything back out and loading it all back in. But during that time and those activities, although they were somewhat tedious, it was amazing the friendships that we made. We'd go out to eat afterwards, and the friendship just became deeper and deeper and deeper. So as you saw there, we grew in numbers. The first praise band, played there at Liberty. Brian played his guitar there. It started out there, and I got an opportunity to put my PowerPoint skills to use working with Dee Dee. But we continued to make more friends. We met Stefan and Jeanette Dunham, We met Alex Walter. We met Tony and Aaron All at this times. And we
no kids at the time.
No kids. We reconnected with friends Jonathan and Laurel Phillips. And some of the memories there is that first bear hug I got from Tony All. Never forget that. And that is one of Tony's trademarks that we all love. And so then, that all led to becoming chartered. But before we could do that, we had to have a name, right? And so, we threw out all the traditional names and looked at those, but it just didn't seem like the right sort of culture or what we wanted, because we want something that reminded us of our dependency on God, and actually a nod to the growing viticulture the community that was coming up in the surrounding area. So what do you know, we landed on Vine and Branches, and how appropriate. And so we love that. So there were so many activities from the point of chartering to our first worship that contained God moment after God moment. And we love the fact that Ray really kind of coined that term for us. He's constantly reminding us of when those God moments pop up. But they gave us assurance that this leap of faith we were taking was really under God's care. He brought people with gifts and talents that we needed and enabled so many hours to be invested. It was amazing when you look at everything that was done, from securing the purchase of the land to designing the facility, obtaining the loan, holding an emotional groundbreaking, constructing the facility, resolving the challenges, selecting the furnishings, preparing for occupancy, hiring our first child care director and all the teachers, and then finally holding that first service. You might not know this, but another God moment, as part of the loan application, several individuals offered up the equity in their homes as loan collateral. And just a huge thank you to those individuals for taking the risk. Really appreciate that. And many of you might not know that behind every piece of drywall and insulation in this building are names and prayers written by adults, children's with ink pens, markers, crayons, you name it. We had a wonderful ceremony where we actually all came, and Dax did a blessing, and we all got our marker or our writing instrument of choice and went around. So how many people remember where their names are or their prayers? Do you remember? I know that Brian and I have something written right back there about our kids and a special individual who was struggling with something at the time. But so I just want to share one final memory. So at the time that we said we're all in, we decided that if we were going to really be all in, we needed to move. And so Simon and Heather Reeder masterfully sold our old home and represented us with the new home build. And not only were they wonderful realtors, but they became wonderful friends. And so, as with many home builds, though, our move-in date had slipped, and we were faced with finding temporary housing. So somehow, Ken and Sandy Watkinson found out, and the next thing we know, we are moving into Chez Watkinson Bed and Breakfast. And they put up with us for 2.5 months. But while we were there, we got a taste of heaven with their hospitality, home-cooked meals, snuggles with the dogs, dear Christian friends, and what wonderful people they are. So, I just wanted to share kind of another perspective of all this, coming from a different congregation, and just thank you all for the blessing that you have been to Brian and I. Back to you, Ray.